All right, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get to the administrivia. As always, this session is being recorded. This is the IETF note well. If you're not familiar with the Code of Conduct policies or the intellectual property implications of you attending here, I encourage you to search for IETF note well in your favorite search engine or scan the QR code that you see right now and read up about those subjects. These are some meeting tips for the technical aspects of the discussion today. This Meet Echo client you're using now, you can use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen to join the MOQ and to participate in any shows of hands we might do. In general, you should leave your audio and video off, which most of you are already doing. Obviously, if you're sharing or presenting, certainly turn on your audio. We encourage you to also turn on your video. There is some lag and unmuting of about roughly 1 second, so you should mute a little bit before you intend to speak, and if you're in a back and forth, feel free to just leave your mic on. I'm getting better, but remembering to follow my own advice and use a headset because the echo cancellation properties of this tool are not very good. And if you're just running a speaker, there's going to be a ton of feedback when you're in a communication. We will have to mute you when you're not speaking. That's not ideal, so please do go find some headphones that you possibly can. We need a scribe for today, as always. We're just looking for the key decision points and the key points, not a transcript. There's a recording of this meeting, and that is sufficient to generate a transcript, and so we don't need a human being to do a transcript. That is easy to recover through other means. But it is useful for people who don't want to watch an hour and a half of meeting to have a way to see what the key actions were. Do I have any volunteers?
I'll do it this time if you want.
Thank you, Ian. Generous of you. Ian might be presenting today, so can I get a backup for when he's on the clock?
I will handle it.
I
will handle it.
A good example for other chairs, but a bad example. Okay, thank you. Okay. Lovely. Thank you, gentlemen. Next slide. Let's see. Okay, here are some upcoming dates. We just concluded virtual interop, and very soon Mike English will be having the debrief for that. I've not yet set up the email for this, but agenda request for the next meeting, which is the 12th of January, will be due on January 5th. I encourage you to ask for time if you need it. I know a lot of people didn't get time in Montreal, so that's certainly an option. And then we have 2 more interims before our. Oh, that's a typo. It's February 5th, not February 25th, in Boulder, Colorado. That is our hybrid interim, which is a 4-day event that's been well documented in the list. That is not up on data tracker yet. We're going to bug our AD to approve the request that we made. This is the agenda today. Ian or Suhas, do you have slides for ABR?
I have them, but they're not as polished as I would like, because I was under the impression that we were going to do filters and open error issues instead. Is that wrong? Did I misread the room? Sorry.
Well, the last thing we discussed over the editor chat was that you asked for time, and that you asked for time a little bit late, and that Alan was fine with giving it up for you.
Oh, okay. I think that was under the condition that things were reviewed, and I think some things weren't reviewed.
Do you not want to go?
I would need to go.
It's fine to say no.
I think next time would be better if we can do that, as long as we can use this time productively. Okay.
Okay, yeah, let's just cut that from the agenda then. Is Mo on? Mo is on. Mo, are you prepared to talk about your PR, or do we need to let this bake for a little bit more?
I'm prepared, but it all depends on whether or not you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, I think maybe I've solved my problem. Yep. Yes, I'm prepared, and hopefully my mic keeps working.
Okay, excellent. Then we will pencil you in at the start of editor's time then. If you have any slides, feel free to. If not, we can just have share your screen or something. All right. So first up is Mike with our interop report from last week.
All right. So last week we had a virtual hackathon for interop. We targeted draft 14 again at the request of various people, some of whom were at the MOQ in Montreal. And the idea was to kind of go a bit deeper than we had been. Kind of went over, we are making a lot of wire format changes and going from one draft to the next with every chance that we have to interop. A lot of the testing has ended up being kind of more surface level, like can we exchange setup and get past that initial step? So the idea was to go a little bit deeper and continue kind of digging in on draft 14, which was good because a lot of people have implemented that one. In terms of what people actually ended up doing, there was some additions to the spreadsheet, which I can share my screen in a moment. Let's see, share. Okay, so this is the current state of spreadsheet. We're getting to the point where we have so many implementations, it's hard to fit them all on one slide that's readable all at once, which is a good problem to have. If we zoom in here, you can see that there is a good amount of interop between some of the implementations, and we're kind of filling in more details. People who showed up and were kind of on the call included Martin and Alan with the Moxgen and Google Quiche implementations. Peter Chave was also there. Peter had built a new interop test runner kind of web interface around the script that Alan had included in Moxgen. And so we ended up doing quite a bit of kind of testing and debugging of that system and kind of testing against that. That surfaced some interesting issues. Some of the questions were about like, is this a brittle test on the test client side, or is this an actual bug in a relay implementation? We sorted some of those out. I think just this morning, I was talking with folks who are working on MOQ-RS, and we think that we've determined that there is an ordering issue. That's the reason that the majority of our tests in that system are failing. It has to do with the when you receive a stream group header for a track when you haven't gotten a subscribe OK yet. We don't currently buffer that. Screenshot, yes. If you can put the URL in chat. I was just looking for that in my notes. Let me pull that up. I know it was on the list too. But yeah, that that web interface was really nice. And then I spent the majority of the day working on a new interop test runner. So similar to the QUIC interop test runner, I have in the works a new test runner that will allow for running multiple implementations against each other in a matrix, basically automating this spreadsheet here. And so I have a handful of test cases that cover, some of the simple ones here. So, exchanging client setup, being able to announce a track or a namespace, subscribing to a track, whether it's there or it's not there. One thing that highlighted was a difference in subscribe behavior assumptions. So whether you support lingering subscribe or not, Cisco has an implementation that if you send a subscribe for a track that hasn't yet been announced in any way, then you just wait there. You don't receive an error. But none of the other relay implementations I could find implemented that lingering subscribe. Everyone else sends a subscribe error. So I wrote my test case to kind of assume the error. And so then, by that measure, the lapse relay, fails the test. So the idea with the relay or the interop test runner that I'm working on is that by having multiple client test implementations, we can kind of build consensus on what is the appropriate behavior for some of these things that might be a little squishy. So let me switch over my share to the other tab here, and you can see the interop runner.
Mike, I have a quick question.
So you need to stop and restart that.
You mentioned
Yes.
the lingering subscribe. Is that something we think we need to add to the requirements, or there's an issue for? I can imagine putting a parameter on a subscribe that says basically this is how long I want it to hang out. And, obviously the server could be like, you said 2 minutes, I'll give you 15 seconds, whatever. But it's not a ridiculous feature. I don't know. But I don't have a strong preference.
Yeah, there was some
just don't
related
want-
discussion around.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was some related follow-up discussion, as this difference became apparent. We also started discussing the difference in behavior around subscribe namespace versus subscribe. In that subscribe namespace can support scenarios where the publisher might go away and come back. And subscribe namespace might be a better mechanism for the cases where you want to handle the publisher not being present and correctly wiring up the downstream subscribers in that case. Yeah, Mo?
Just to clarify why we allow the rendezvous to happen by the subscriber first is because that avoids clipping the media as much as possible. Because if you force the publishers to come up first, then the subscribers are coming in late and they always miss the beginning of the media. And so if it's video, you're always going to miss the iframe. So we try to bias towards pre-warming all the connections like RTP does. RTP forces the receivers to open their ports before they do any signaling, right? So we kind of do the same thing. We prepare, subscribers are prepared to receive, and they join first. And that's why we let all that stuff land on the relay first. And then as the publishers are ready to send, they can start blasting away and you get the very first bite of the iframe.
Yep. Yeah, the use case for it makes sense to me. Martin, I'm going to press this button while we're talking. I'm guessing I'm probably
sounds
almost
good.
out of time.
My Wi-Fi is not good right now, so I apologize if I break up. But I found the letter key in the matrix to be unsatisfactory to what we're actually doing here. You've got most people are not testing subscribe error and those sorts of things. Furthermore, it's very oriented towards clients being subscribers, servers being publishers, when in fact, as far as I can tell, all of our interop is relay oriented, that people are bringing their applications and running through a third-party relay. So I wonder, and I don't have I've been thinking about, I haven't fully thought through what this should look like, but maybe you have some insight. I'm not asking you to like lay that out now, but maybe we could reform the letter key to match what we're actually doing. Or alternatively, encourage people to test cases that will do things like subscribe error. But something probably,
Yes.
instead of having a client and server thing, have a relay and endpoint thing, and measure what makes it through the relay in some respects. Or maybe there are use cases that don't going through, but just completely reconceptualizing this whole.
Yes.
Test case,
it looks like you froze, but I think I got the gist of what you're saying. And I agree. So in the version I'm working on, where we have the automated interop test runner, the test cases do kind of have their own specifications that are a little bit more detailed. And most of them are written in terms of having, in the automation is designed to have, by default, one implementation that provides the original publisher and end subscriber, and then a relay in the middle. And so it's kind of like a relay under test by a client implementation. But in the same sense, by having kind of multiple relay implementations and multiple client implementations, it's not just saying like we have one conformance test suite that is, definitive and all relays, must match this particular interface. It's kind of also testing client implementations against, the relay behavior. Yeah, Alan?
Oh, I was waiting for my video and audio. Hey there. So I'm in terms of what's going on in this tool, it is currently pinned to Moxygen, but the publisher and the subscriber are doing something that's defined by a probably expired draft. So in theory, anybody could write the client and server that goes in this, and you could have 3 drop downs, like what client do you want to use, what server do you want to use, and what relay do you want to use, and get more permutations. Although like tracking that as like a conformance, like as a spreadsheet, makes my head explode. But at least in terms of just like, I'm sure people are mostly interested, like, does my, if I put my client and my server with someone else's relay, does it work? And so that seems like a relatively straightforward extension to this. If people are, implementing at least the mock test publisher is not complicated. Writing a subscriber that can verify you got everything you're supposed to get, that's a little trickier.
Yeah, and I think that's where it becomes difficult to not introduce some brittleness and like assumptions. It's like the subscriber expects like objects to arrive in a certain order, and it's hard to like handle all the different valid permutations there. So most of my tests that I have in the current, like my mock test client in mock RS, that's kind of what I'm using for the interop runner, is more oriented towards some of the test cases that we have in the spreadsheet that are kind of like control message state. But I do want to incorporate this kind of like delivery, like what's happening in the data plane, are the right objects flowing through. So I think eventually these things kind of meet in the middle, and we have kind of an interop runner that can do all the things with all the different implementations. 1 second. I think I can actually pull up a copy of a report that I generated from this. Let me just see if I'm on the right branch.
Question for the group. I'd like to file an issue, even if we don't end up doing a lot about this, just to make sure like we think this is collectively covered by the draft the lingering subscribe thing. Does anyone want to take an AI to do that, or do you want me to? I just want to know who's filing something. Okay. I will do it if no one else volunteers, just to make sure it happens. But okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. I do have another pending screen share to show a sneak peek of the interop test runner. Otherwise, I think that's it. Oh, I guess the last thing would be looking ahead to February and like future interop. Which browser? Uh-oh.
I think that's is that Suhas
that's
trying to join?
Suhas trying
Yeah.
to join Meet Echo. Okay.
So you're asking what is our next interop plan?
Yeah. So the other thing that we discussed on Wednesday was we're kind of looking ahead towards probably a draft 16, I think in January, and then having that be the interop target for our February interim. And there was a kind of a warning that like this might be a bigger lift than some of the other recent drafts if people have not like started on draft 15 yet. Is that accurate? And are there any other thoughts on what makes sense? I think we probably should keep moving again. Like we've spent a good amount of time on draft 14.
Yeah, so I think we will try to cut draft 16 hopefully early in January. We do have the I think that 12th, which is the next interim after this one, would be probably the last possible time to cut it, and that's 4 weeks basically to the interop. That if you want to bring a serious draft 16 implementation and you're currently on 14 and haven't lifted a finger towards 15, I would clear those 4 weeks. Like it's not, well, I don't know. Now there's or vibe code. Maybe you can get it done super fast, but like we've been working on 15 in the background while we continue moving on 14 and shipping away at it. But like 16 is a bunch more stuff. So if you roll into Boulder thinking that you're going to get it done in a day, don't expect a lot of interop.
All right, it's a good heads up. Martin, are you able to approve my pending screen share? I can show the interop test runner really quick. Thank you. Test results. Okay, so this is like reporting that comes out of my little test runner. By default, there's kind of like a target draft version, and it will run all the implementations it can find at that draft target against each other. So like you can do self interop and report on that. I think that's valuable, useful signal to like what should work elsewhere. And then, running against other implementations, I was able to get the Moxygen Docker image working in this system. So the Moxygen relay under test by the MockRS test client, both as web transport and as raw QUIC. And then it also has the ability to run against remote URLs of publicly available relays. So each implementation can be defined as like having a particular Docker image, or also having URLs available for QUIC and web transport endpoints to test against. And then like in these test results, you can see, for example, like the libquicker test results fail on the case, which is subscribe error, right? Like it doesn't send me a subscribe error like we were discussing. And then I also include the client initial ID, so you can look up logs. So eventually this will be kind of also give you like mlogs to verify behavior, and we can use those for additional validation and verification. So I'll keep working on this and hopefully have a more complete version of it available for Denver, or Boulder, because we're in Boulder next time. All right, thank you.
Need to unmute Martin. But thanks,
Mike. Thanks for your. All right. Okay, Mike, thanks for your efforts in this area. I feel like we're making a ton of progress, and it's getting some insights to feedback into the design, which is all you could want from interop. Next up is our demo from Ollie. So I'll hand it off to you, Ollie.
Hello, good morning, good evening. I hope everybody can hear me. So first, I'm going to show a couple of slides, illustrating what we have done, and then we are going to run the demo. You can see the slides, right? All right, perfect. We have been playing with track switching for a while. We presented some of these issues earlier. I'm going to recap very quickly. So you are currently on track 1, and then you want to switch to track number 2. And then the first option is you can subscribe track 2 and then unsubscribe from track 1. And then you are going to get track 2 objects eventually. And until track 1 is if track 1 is stopped immediately before track 2 is received, there could be a playback stall, right? That's a problem. And another issue is if you subscribe track number 2 and then you don't unsubscribe right away from track 1, and you will only unsubscribe once you start receiving track 2 objects, well, you will get some excess traffic. And this is very problematic, especially you are trying to downshift because your available bandwidth has dropped. So one solution we presented almost a year ago, we even have a draft for that, switch track ID parameter, where we overloaded the subscribe message with the identifier for the new track, for all tracks, current track. So as soon as the relay is able to forward the track 2 objects to you, it will stop sending track 1 objects. And we showed that this worked beautifully in the sense that it avoided excess traffic, and then the switch was pretty much automatic, right? This didn't really take off too much, and then there was a lot of other discussion in the working group. And one approach was forwarding preference, as you know. So you subscribe 2 tracks at the same time, with forward 1 for one and then forward 2 for the other one. And you just receive the one that you set forwarding preference to 1. And then eventually, if you want to switch, you send a subscribe update message for the current track, making forwarding equals 0. And then forwarding 1 for the new track. And you can also put these filter options so that your switching is going to happen hopefully at that specific boundary. So here we are going to add we are going to cease the transmission of track 1 at the end of group number 4, and we are going to start track number 2 at the start of group number 5. So this is this is supposed to solve all problems, but then obviously there are multiple update messages and things like that. Now, switch message, what we implemented based on mostly the PR submitted by Gwendal a couple of weeks ago. So the same scenario, and instead of playing with the forwarding preferences, we just say switch from track 1 to track 2. And then if the relay doesn't have track 2, obviously it needs to get it from the publisher from upstream. And then once the track 2 objects are available, it's going to start transmitting track 2. And here the trick is, the relay is going to stop sending track 1 objects, at the end of a certain group. And then, track 2 is going to start with the next group, right? So to illustrate this, what we implemented, it's going to look something like this. So we want to switch from track 1. We send a switch message at time equals T0. And then just a little bit after, the relay is going to, update some certain state information. And then, at the end of this group or the next, but usually it is a current group, if it is not really too close, we are going to stop sending a group or track number 1, and then we're going to start sending track number 2. And then hopefully a bit later, the subscriber is going to start receiving track number 2. And the switching time, as we are measuring in our implementation, is T3 minus T0. So that's the latency difference. Any questions before we switch to the demo? For the switch demo, I will say. We implemented all these, by the way, and Dennis is gonna show you, the differences. Obviously, just in a couple of minutes, the differences won't be really obvious, but from our experience in the last couple of weeks, switch message is a lot cleaner, a single transaction, and it gets the job done. Yes, Mo, question?
Yeah, hey, I'll just make sure I understand. So your switch message replaces 2 subscribe update messages. That's the essential change.
Yes. So it's a single message that will allow you,
Right.
switch from one track to another.
But doesn't have to have the equivalent of all of the fields in the both subscribe updates. So isn't in effect sending the same information? You're saying stop this track at this point. So you're putting a stop point on one track and you're saying start point on the other track. So you're updating the end of one track and the beginning of the other track, right? So isn't that the same information that would go on subscribe update as switch?
Yes,
Or am I missing
essentially.
something?
Yes, essentially, but with this one, I mean, you are sending 2 subscribe updates, right?
Right.
And then they may or may not be processed together by the relay.
Oh, okay. So you're
So
wanting to
switch,
phase share the 2 messages.
Switch is gonna do it in a single transaction.
Okay, I got it.
And it's not the only benefit of switch as well. Like in case we don't have the group available on the relay for the track we are switching to, then we'll introduce a gap on the client, because the client may not be able to know which groups are available at a moment's instance. So essentially, we are instructing relay that our intentions are to switch to a new track, and once the group is available, it will switch cleanly and without any gaps. So that's one of the other benefits of switch message.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. It's much more than just replacing 2 updates. It's that you offload the switching process to the relay, because the relay is the only one who knows what subscription it has, what group it has in its cache, what it can do in terms of sending without seamlessly the data. The reduction of the number of messages is just details in this area. The point is to prevent gap and to prevent duplication of tracks.
Things are much easier to deal with when everything is available on the relay more, but the problematic cases are when not all the tracks are available on the relay, or when different groups are available for each track, right? You want to switch like at a specific boundary, but maybe the track you want to switch to, track number 2 in this case, maybe it's running a bit behind, right? So I mean, that's going to be a problem. So in case the relay cannot really complete the switching process, it's going to send a switch error message, right? Or I can't complete this because the track you want to switch to, maybe it's running too behind, too late, right? Okay, let me stop sharing, and Dennis, can you share your screen?
Sure.
And I'm going to give just a 1 minute background on this demo. It's actually available. You can try yourself as well. So it is abr.mocktail.dev, and you will go there. You will see 2 relays, one in Chicago and one in Sydney. Actually, it's really 2 different places, and then you can pick the one that you like. And once you enter the demo, yes, just go ahead, Dennis.
So yeah, we can select the whichever closest to you, but essentially when you enter, it's going to select the closest one to you. We don't have any cast IP, so this is the best that we can do. And once we go to the ABR demo, you'll see a couple of things. So of course, the video player here, you can unmute the video if you like to, but it's not part of the demo. What we can see here on I called it the object display. Basically, you can see a representation of which objects are coming from which track, on which bitrate, resolution, and all. So this makes it easier to see once we switch, do we receive objects from the older track, or do we cleanly switch, and when we switch. And it also represents the buffer we have for each individual tracks. I'm just going to reduce the latency a bit so that we can see the switch much more faster. And for the purpose of a switch demo, you can disable it by clicking here. Once you click here, it's going to restart the MOQ client, and you're going to use the older method, the one with the filter types and forwarding preferences. But right now, by default uses the switch message. So once we switch up, it's going to send the switch message, wait for the subscribe update, and whenever the relay sends the new group with the new track alias, it's going to immediately switch. So when I click it, you see immediately we receive the new track, new objects, and I can do it as much as I want. And see, we switch it cleanly. And here on the graph, we can see which track we are getting and when we are getting it. We also have a Oracle mode. Basically, this one uses a profile, twitch, LT, or stress, and forces the switch messages or switch of tracks based on a profile. So the stress profile goes through all of the tracks one by one, so that you can see how fast it changes, when it changes. And if you are really curious about the statistics on the console, we have a table that shows all of the switch.
Dennis, we are not seeing your console in case you are sharing. Yeah, a lot of statistics are available in the console. So
yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really familiar with Meet Echo. So if you just open the console, there will be a table showing the start location and location of the switch, and how long it takes to make the switch. So yeah, I mean, essentially,
just to confirm, this Oracle mode, like the client knows exactly what track it's supposed to pick. So that's why it's like a perfect, like on the graph, as you can see, it's like a perfect rate adaptation. We are still working on the other two modes. Dennis, can you click on the Oracle ABR just to show them? Yeah, relay assisted ABR and the no assistance ABR. Hopefully they will be available soon, but we have been dealing with the switcher for a while, so hopefully they will be next.
Yeah. On these modes, we will be also making it available for you to throttle your bandwidth just from this demo page, so that at least you can see either of these options do their magic depending on the profile you selected.
Yeah,
it's just currently in development. But yeah, I mean, if I click use switch message again, it will disable it, and I can do the same thing like I did here, and it will make the switch again. But just know that the benefit of switch message is much more pronounced in lower bandwidth scenarios. I have a pretty good internet connection here, so the difference is not really visible here. But once you try to the much worse connection, the latency between individual subscribe updates might differ. So you will see sometimes, like you saw here on track 4, we receive some 4 rogue objects. This is going to be much more pronounced. So you'll receive much more objects that are not really meant to be received by the client. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, Ali, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. I mean, the goal is to avoid any gaps when you're switching tracks, and then obviously also avoid any excessive duplicate objects, because they will be waste of resources. And I mean, also maybe equally important, important thing is complete the switch as soon as possible, right? The switching time. Sometimes it might not be possible to do the switch right away, and then in that case, the relay is going to send you an error message so that you can try again.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions about the switch in general, or the demo itself? Yes, Colin?
Hey, so I don't have a headset, sorry. So that may be a mess, but can you say more about how the switch actually works? Like what, if we were writing a spec for this in the relay, like what's the semantics of how the switch actually works? Because it sounds different than just, obviously it's different than just the subscribe, unsubscribe, and or the two updates. So I'm just trying to understand how it actually works.
Hello. I mean, I can go over it because I did not prepare any slides to support the PR that has been written. But I mean, the idea at the relay is to force the unsubscribe and the subscribe to for the subscriber at the next available group boundary. And so the next available group boundary depends on if you have both tracks in your cache, or if you already subscribe to this, or if you need to go to subscribe to upstream to get the right data at the right time. So the first point is to just check if you have the subscription for the track B, and then to select the next group boundary which will be available. So this is.
But in the update subscribe case, wouldn't they be available? I mean, because you have subscribed to them, and that's the way you knew that the client knew. Like, I don't quite get the case where they're not available, but the client knows the group numbers.
You don't know if you don't know if this relay has a cache.
This has nothing to do with cache. If the relay doesn't cache at all, it's still, let's just assume a non-caching relay, like it still seems it's the same, right? I don't see how the cache matters.
Actual cache doesn't matter, Colin. So what we did in Mocktail actually while implementing switch, actually when you get a switch message, if it's in the cache, then we just start like detecting whether the groups are aligned, and when we have the same group number with the old track group that we have, and then we can understand that we can start transmitting objects from the new track. But if it's not in the cache, or if we don't have a existing subscription for the new track, we send a subscribe message to upstream and to get data actually. And then when we start receiving, we wait for the alignment of the groups. So if they're aligned, then we can just confidently say that, okay, we'll start with the next group. So that's where we just can be sure that there's no gap between the switches. So actually, in practice, when you get a switch, so the from track and to track, and you actually, practically, you just send a new subscribe message if there is no subscription for the new track. So it's just same as if you're sending a new subscribe message. But the difference between two subscribe messages, actually using two subscribe messages, the difference is actually when you send a switch, then you create a context that these are related to each other, and those two tracks. And then using that context actually on the relay, you do the math. So if they're aligned, then I will just send. So that's, we can call it a switch context for two tracks. and also then you can adapt into that switch context with new tracks. So it gets some sense of context, switching context between different tracks on the relay. So you provide some information, actually, some hints about how to switch between those tracks, actually. So that's the idea.
Question, Will?
Yeah, so I was basically answering Cullen's question, but Zafra went over it. The difference between the two approaches, with switch, the client doesn't actually know anything about the group number it's going to switch at. It just wants the switch to be as fast as possible, not duplicate content. That's its requirement. In the prior case with subscribes, the client has to take a guess or a stab. It knows what it's receiving, but what it's receiving can actually be backed up compared to the state on the server. So in the prior case, the client has to guess and hope that its guess reflects the real world. And with a switch, it doesn't have to guess because it doesn't send any number. It just asks the relay to wait until it can switch, and then it switches. That was a core difference. That was the answer. My question for you, Ali, is obviously this is very dependent. When you have well-connected clients and well-connected relays, you don't see problems. You can dual subscribe your way into this. Is it possible to extend your solution here to add a delay to the new track you're switching to, just to simulate issues or problems with that? Because that might expose more of the benefits of one solution over another.
That's a good point, Will. Yeah, that's something that's something similar to what we are planning for this. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to go further into the analysis of the switch, what could be good is to have some, bandwidth limitation like TC or whatever, to actually drop the bandwidth between the relay and the client, and then the client will be further and further from the live. And this is when the switch becomes absolutely essential, because if you are 2-3 groups behind live, then you don't know what to do exactly and what is the switching capabilities of the relay. So it would be good to see this in action, meaning a TC from the relay between the relay and the subscribers, and the subscriber which can accommodate some buffering and some latency. That would reflect some use cases for the streaming.
And just to note, I mean, the 4 representations we have here, like half a megabit, 1 megabit, 2 and 4 megabits per second. While they are being published live, I mean, they are not necessarily being pushed by the publisher to the relay at the same time, right? So, we are not really doing anything special on the publisher side at the moment. So, as soon as the output of the transcoder is available, we just push them to the relay, right? So, something we need to check, the difference between the arrival times of the same object or the corresponding object on, in the different tracks to the relay, right? So let's say group number 5 and then object 0, what is really the delta time between the first object and the last object, like among these 4 tracks? I mean, that's also something we need to look into. Yeah.
The use case in the streaming industry is usually when we have network condition which degrades between the relay and the subscriber. If you put like the relay and subscriber doesn't have more than 700 kilobits per second, and if you are on the 1080p stuff, you will need to reduce. But the time it takes you to understand that you are late and that you don't have the bandwidth, this is how you will be late. You will be 1 group or 2 groups behind. And this is where our switch can bring all the potentials of it.
Yep, that's true.
2 quick questions. One is, I definitely like the ability for the server to do this. However, I much prefer your, I forgot the name, alt track group approach that I think was in your document that you previously published.
Switch track
is there a
ID.
reason you didn't implement that?
Switch track ID, is that what you're referring to?
I thought it was called alt track group.
I think alt-track was a name Will or Gwendal used at some point in GitHub. Similar things. Yeah.
Yeah, alt-track is in the MSF catalog, and it tells the client what tracks you can switch between. It's just an
like
identifier.
alternate representations. Yeah. Yep.
You would use the switch method after reading alt tracks to know what you could switch.
Yeah.
Wait, but couldn't you just use alt track and then you have like 3 or 4 alternate representations and just let the server do the right thing?
If you have server-side switching, yes, but this is client-side switching.
Yeah.
We could have both, right?
I mean,
if
this
you
is
tell
sort
the
of
server
server-side switching.
which tracks are alternatives of one another, then we could invent a mechanism by which the server gives you the highest one it can for your throughput. But that would be a server-based decision. You'd still need to communicate which tracks are substitutes for one another.
Right. Yeah. Clearly, you need to communicate the substitutes. I see this as like server-side switching with n equals 2. Right. I don't know. I think
when you
to
say
do
this, what Ali's showing is client-side switching. The client's still deciding to switch. It decides when to switch. This is just a mechanism to execute that switch smoothly. The relay is not making any bandwidth or throughput decisions.
Isn't it trying to make sure it has enough bandwidth to actually do the switch, or no?
I don't believe so, but Ali can.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So
okay.
I mean, you're just telling the relay, I want to switch from this track to this track. I mean, it doesn't even know or care whether you are going to be able to receive that track.
Okay. I assumed it did do that. Okay. And anyway, I prefer the other approach as an individual. Thanks.
As always, Ali, thanks for bringing in the demo. It's extremely good to understand better. But I do have one probably clarification, which I'm slightly leaning towards what Ian is saying, but I want to understand better is like when, let's say I'm switching from currently the track A is group 5, and I send a switch message. I do not know when the next switch point is, but I want relay to automatically decide that. And at some point, it decides because of the delay between the 2 tracks, the relay gets group 7 and it decides that's a switch point. And it starts sending group 7. Immediately, if the bandwidth goes down, then the client has to send another switch to fix the previous switch, right?
Yes. Yep.
So this smooth switch, the whole point about smooth switch would happen only if we have decent conditions in terms of bandwidth for which especially when you're doing up switch. If not, I think we end up in similar kind of doing another round trip to fix which somehow makes me feel that if you are going all the way to the point where the server is or the relay is making this decision, why not give hints to the relay to say these are my related tracks and this is my criteria to switch, and also add in the bandwidth measurement. That way you can do smooth switching to server side, give relay more control. At the same time, have the current mechanisms where you pause the current track, especially when things go down, even after the server did a switch and let's say the experience is not good, it can temporarily pause those things. That kind of gives you a much smoother switching than this down switch issue when things really go wrong.
I mean, I think we beat this topic to that in Slack like last week or 2 weeks ago. There are definitely advantages when the relay actually picks the best. Definition of best is based on some function, right? The best track for you given a time, right? I mean, there will be things the relay is going to know before the subscriber is going to be able to infer from the network conditions and things like that. And then there will be other things that the client is going to know when the relay has no idea. So whether you want to, forward all that information to the relay and let the relay do the switching versus, the relay forwards whatever information it knows and lets the client do the switching. I mean, I think there are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches.
Yeah, definitely not disagree. I'm not saying that only servers should do the switch. I was thinking if we are gone almost 70% of the way to make the server do the switching by not specifying the group ID on which to switch, rather than saying whenever you find the right math, do the switch. And if you add to that equation one more thing about you do the switch given the current bandwidth conditions that you measure, then you got 90% of server side switch. And yes, client definitely always client has the control because it knows the application. The relay would not know the application as much a client would know.
Yes.
And client can make a choice to say, given the conditions you did switch but it did not work, I'm going to ask you to pause the 4K stream because that didn't help. Right, so client has a control. I was trying to get to the point that you are given almost like more than 50% of the control for the switch to the server. Why don't you add another parameter where the switch is really automatic, and hence the switch would be more on server side, but client finally controls if something did not work, which only client can do it. A server cannot do it on behalf of the client. I think we both are on the same page in the sense that there's a combination of things. The cut point here is we are trying to figure out is that at what point can server do and at what point the client has to jump in to fix the issue, right?
Yeah, I think we better also implement what you are describing, Suaz. I mean, that's also in our plans, and see which one works better with the conditions and scenarios. I mean, certainly the one that you are proposing is going to require a bit more information, state information on the relay, but I think it's still manageable.
Thanks, Ali.
Yes. I asked to inform you. I locked the queue now. I think we will have to wrap this up.
So my question is sort of about how I'm trying to figure out how we're going to move forward here. To what degree do we need to it seems like we're in the process of figuring out server side or publisher side switching. Do we need to figure that out first so that we don't end up with like two wildly different designs for when we want client side switching and server side switching, and then sort of circle back here? Because I mean, I know people put a bunch of time into the switch PR. I just trying to figure out, and maybe that's a chair question, like how are we going to move forward? Are we going to punch to Denver or Boulder or something else?
I think it makes sense to chat after the presentation 2 weeks from now, and then we can decide whether that's enough information or we need time in Boulder maybe.
Except it's not 2 weeks. It's on the 12th of January, but the next.
Oh, it's on the 12th?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think Boulder would be a good place to discuss this. At least the switch PR as it is written represent the requirements for the streaming industry, which is highly on client ABR for many reasons. And if we want to add parameters and to change this to make it like a server side ABR friendly, let's discuss this, but don't change the requirements of this switch client side because we absolutely need it.
All right, I think Mo, you're up to talk about the design team output.
Okay, let me see if I can share this. Just wants to reload my browser to do a screen share. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Is it possible to do a tab share with Meet Echo without screen share privileges?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, if I have to drop, if I have to reload my browser, I have to drop off and come back in. Is anybody seeing anything?
Yes, it
Yeah.
came up. Yep.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So for the record, you can tab share even though you don't have screen share privileges. Good to know for Meet Echo. So for the filters, we've had a lot of meetings. We had side meetings at Montreal. We had some more email conversations about a bunch of nuances, and I think the main point we're at now is to figure out, do we have enough nailed down to land a base PR? I think this is kind of boiling the ocean of there's going to be so many things that are filter related that we could pull in, and I want to avoid constantly revving the PR. So I'd like to figure out what people think is enough base functionality without any glaring holes. We don't want to land something that has an obvious glaring hole or a conflict with any other part of the spec. But what we have today is in PR 1401. There's it's about the majority of it is a large addition to a section called filters, but then there's a lot of peppered changes throughout to the existing subscription filters, to the existing text around parameters and fetch joining fetch absolute and relative start locations. But the majority of it is what I'm going to show and talk about right here, which is the section called filters. And we'd like people to review it and figure out, do we have enough nailed down to be able to land this, and then maybe tackle some of the other issues. And I'll briefly mention some of them that Ian and Will have brought up. Can we tackle some of those with follow-on PRs? So the filters are all control messages, parameters and control messages. And the very first section talks about which filters go into which control messages. I think one of Ian's points was that he jumped straight to one of the filters, the track filter and specifically, and he didn't see the messages that it applied to. So maybe we need to pull this common section back out and duplicate it in all the other section. Well, the point was to try to remove some of the duplication across all the other sections. Maybe we can undo that if people find that confusing. But there's 7 different filters. The core set are the group, subject, object, and priority and extension filters. This is the core set that started off in PR 1164 with the object filters. And they're the easiest to understand. They're basically just a set of filters of start and end ranges for the group ID, for the subgroup ID, the object ID, for the priority, and for an extension type value. You get start and end ranges, multiple of them for each of those filters, and you can combine all of these filters. They're all independent. So when you combine multiple of them, multiple parameters, you end up with the and, or, a logical intersection of all of these filter criteria. So going through briefly what filters go into which messages. Like I mentioned, all of these are kind of common. The group filter, subgroup, object, priority, and extension filter, those are all kind of common, same layout, same messages that they apply to. The location filter also goes into the same messages, but it is not a repeatable list of ranges. It's only a single location range, and the other ones are just straight 64-bit comparisons, variant comparisons of a single variant. All of these parameters, all these fields in the object header are single variants. Whereas the location filter is like 128-bit value because you have a start group and object ID. So it's a little bit different. because it takes a group and object to make the location. And it only allows one single location to filter. It doesn't let you say, 10 different locations in the same filter. And the reason for that is because the filter already, can span arbitrary big ranges. It can span, from a specific object, group and object to another ending group and object. So it can already span multiple groups, span multiple objects. So that's why that one doesn't have a bunch of ranges. And the ranges are bounded by a setup parameter. There's further down in the document, there's a setup parameter that governs what the max number of ranges are in these filters. And for the track filter, there's a setup parameter for how many tracks, this max tracks selected and max tracks deselected that I'll talk about in a minute. That's how many tracks you're allowed to receive out of a namespace. So there's a setup parameter that can govern that so that you don't have, unbounded huge namespaces with unbounded number of tracks coming at you from those namespaces. The track filter is the one that's the most different. It goes only in subscribe namespace or a request update for subscribe namespace. All of the other filters can also be in subscribe namespace or updates, but they can also be in all of the other subscribe or fetch messages. The notation here shows that all of them basically have optional bodies. So the standard syntax for every parameter, every odd parameter has to have the length prefix. So there's always a length at least. But if the length is 0, that means this entire optional part is omitted. And that's used to indicate no filter. If you have a length 0, that means no filter. And the main reason why you want to do that is for request update. If you want to remove a filter, you can do an update with a length 0 for that filter parameter, and that removes the filter. It doesn't make much sense to use that length 0 null form in the other messages, because if it's omitted, it's the same as a length 0, it means no filter. So it's really only useful for the request update messages to have that zero length omission feature. In addition to omitting the entire filter, almost all of them also allow you to omit from the back forward. So starting from the right, you can omit the last parameter, the end object, which in the case of the location filter, it means you allow all objects in that end group. And similarly, you can omit the end group and end object. So that means you have no end. These filters are also the same. You can omit the end parameter completely, and that means it's open-ended, no end. The location filter also has a few things called special locations, and I'll talk about in a minute. That also lets the start object be omitted. So any hopefully this is clear, and these were already what we presented earlier in the interim. The main new things are the new fields that we added to the track filter, and the location filters, operating on a full location instead of just a 64-bit single variant. Okay. So going on to I'm just going to go through them one by one real quick. Going on to the location filter, the location filter has some special properties. There's special locations. If you eliminate the end group and end object, so it means in a subscribe, that means the subscription is open-ended. So just like today, you can have a subscription filter that is open-ended. You say absolute start. There's no end group. This lets you to do the same thing with this common syntax. So you omit the end group ID and end object ID. It's equivalent to the absolute start subscription filter that we have today. For fetches, if you omit the end group and end object, that's for joining fetches, because joining fetches implicitly end at the largest object that's saved at the time of subscribe. For the corresponding subscribe of the joining fetch, the relay has to save, the publisher has to save the largest object at the time of that subscription, and that's used as the end of the joining fetch. So when this location filter appears in the joining fetch, you omit the end, and that means you use the largest location as your end. There's two other special locations for subscriptions. The subscription filters have a largest object that's used only for joining fetch. And there was a lot of discussion in Montreal about whether or not there's any other use case for this. I never heard a single one. I heard a lot of confusion about what this filter actually does and what it was intended for. But clearly the text only ever invokes it for a joining fetch. And the point is that when you do the subscribe part of a joining fetch, the publisher has to remember the current largest location. And if late objects come in after that largest location gets stamped, earlier objects come in later, the publisher doesn't know whether it should send those on the subscribe streams or on the fetch streams. And so this largest location filter, the largest object filter, allows deterministic behavior that, okay, everything that you get before your subscription point is going to come on the fetch. It's never going to come on those subscribe streams. So that's the whole point of the largest object filter. And this is replicated with the location filter by having a special start group of 0 and start object of 0. So that's just a special code to mean it's not actually starting at group object 0. It's using the largest location that's stamped by the publisher at subscription time. There's another special filter called next group start. So that's when you want to subscribe, but not at the current head. You want to wait for the next group. And today that's done with an enum. And this location filter does the same thing with a start group of 0. So you notice the only difference between these two. These are two special code points, but one omits the start object and one keeps the start object as 0. For joining fetch, there's also two special locations. There's an absolute joining fetch, and there you just put the start group, the absolute start group that you want to start at. And today, joining fetch requires you have the start object as 0. Doesn't really make sense to jump into the middle of a prior group, but this syntax would technically allow for that. But we just have here that you just specify the start object as 0 and an absolute start group, and that's your absolute joining fetch. For relative joining fetch, you omit the start object parameter, and so you only put the start group, but now the start group is a delta because it's relative. So you put a start group delta, not an absolute start group. And again, these are special filters, so they're relative to the largest object that's stamped by the corresponding subscribe for that joining fetch. Location filters got all the nuances because of all the special stuff that we had for subscription filters. We had some discussions in Montreal about simplifying this, about removing some of the things that didn't seem necessary or were overly complex, but there was no consensus on a lot of that. So we ended up with just everything that's in the current spec is supported. Every single mechanism is supported with an identical one-to-one replacement here. And we can simplify later. Future PRs can try to simplify, and if we get consensus on removing some things or simplifying some things, maybe we can do that. But this replicates 100% of what we already have today.
So Mo, two questions, maybe just clarifications. So the if the filter is omitted, or equivalently like in a subscribe update, it might be sent with length 0, that removes all filters. So that is
that removes that one filter.
The location.
So each
filter.
of these are parameters. Each of these are, are parameters. And so that removes that one parameter.
So if there's no filter, that means all object IDs that arrive, all locations that arrive after this time of subscribe, regardless of. So right now in the draft, start group 00, no end is give me everything that arrives late, regardless of location. And that has now become the no filter default. Whereas largest object now is the special spelling with 00. Right? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's right, because we don't have the need for we don't have a need for the enum of absolute start and specifying 00, because
yes,
the location filter is generic and supports all of them. And just remove it, and you get what's equivalent to absolute start 00.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And that's mentioned. So the subscription filter section is still in the spec. It was updated. It was just renamed to subscription location filter because to emphasize that now this is all using the location filter. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I forget which part of the spec it's in. Yeah, there's subscription location filter 512. You want to take a look at that, Martin? That will have all of the largest object, next group start, absolute range, all the subscription filters that were in the current spec are still in the current spec, but now they're implemented using the location filter. So it says use start group 0, object 0, and you get largest object. Absolute start is still there, but you don't put absolute start with start 00 because that would be an unfiltered subscription. So that's not allowed because that's an indicator for largest object. So all the existing filter mechanisms are still there, and we map them one-to-one to what the new location filter does.
Mo, I had a few questions, comments. Yeah, sorry, I missed the thing about that only being relevant to subscribe namespace. But I do think the track filter is like a fairly different thing from all the other filters you're discussing. And to me, that means like putting in a separate PR was probably warranted just from like a cleanliness perspective, because like the object filters are kind of, they're kind of fancier versions of like the location filtering we have today in some sense. And as I commented, like it seems like it might make caching more complex, but I haven't implemented the caching code, and in the scheme of things, you already have to deal with a bunch of edge cases around like things get dropped and so on and so forth. So maybe in the scheme of things, it's like 6 one way, half dozen the other kind of thing. I don't know. I'll let implementers comment on how much more annoying that is. But the track filter is sort of its own thing with its own properties. And so I'd prefer a separate PR. Also maybe just put in a separate section or something. I don't know. Because it
is in its own section. So the track filter is summarized with all the other filters to show that they share a lot of common properties. It's very symmetric with some of the other filters, like the extension filter, and it has a lot of the same properties, but a little bit different which messages it appears in. The fact that you can omit the entire, have a 0 link to omit the entire filter in a request update. That you can combine them. You can combine even the track filter and all these other filters with AND operations to restrict them, and that the track filter must be evaluated after all those other filters. So there's some interplay. I started off with 4 separate PRs for this because some people wanted fetch separately, some people wanted subscription filters separately, some people wanted the track filter separately, and when you had all those separations, it made it impossible to see how any of them fit together. So that's why I thought this was the bare minimum. This is what I thought was the most clean minimum of everything we need that interacts enough with itself to need to be combined. It's clear to be combined. Then if it's pulled out, if I can pull the track filter out into a separate PR if people prefer that. But I don't think it will make it clear. I think it'll make you raise more questions about, well, what if I do, what is the interaction with this and this?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not.
And I'll jump to the section here real quick if you want to see it.
Yeah, Victor made a comment about like maybe the other filters are mergeable sooner rather than later, but the track one actually has like wider implications. You said one thing that kind of threw me off. Did you say the track filter gets applied after the other filters?
it's evaluated after all the other filters, because the point is that the track filter will take all of the ingress tracks that the relay is seeing and decide on egressing only a small subset, only like, the top N of those. And so that operation, if that operation happens before, then you run your other filters after it, then you probably end up with much less than the top N. You may end up with 0, right? You may have selected tracks that end up not passing the other filters. So the point of the track filter being evaluated last is you first eliminate all the things that don't feed into your criteria, that are never going to be forwarded. And then out of those things that are forwardable, which ones have the top value?
Okay. I think that's the opposite of what I would have thought. I would have thought you filter all the tracks, and then within the tracks, the other filters are merely like object filters within a subscription, and that they're totally separable. But so I think
think of a use case, a real use case, and you end up with, you get nothing. Instead of getting top N, you'll get 0 tracks coming into you, because you would have pre-filtered them. If you said, the highest speaker, loudest speaker, but I also want to filter out, EU zone or something, Europe, I only want to select, Europe speakers or something like that. So you end up with, you may end up filtering things and you end up with 0 because you picked the highest speakers, but they were all Americans. And so after your track filter, you threw out all the Europeans. And now you're going to evaluate your non-track filters, your object filters, and you're going to say, oh, I want to remove all of the everybody but Europe. Oh, wait a minute. All the loudest were Americans. So that's why the track filter is specified to evaluate last.
Okay. I mean, I think that puts an awful burden on the relay, because in theory, it has to subscribe to everything and then filter all objects and then do the track filter. It seems a little, the scalability, I don't know. But the other thing is we've now added track extension headers. And so I think maybe the track filter, I'm sure the track filter should apply to track extension headers, but I wonder if this design could be subtly updated to better take advantage of those now that they exist.
We can definitely look at adding text around the intersection of that, because you're right that if these things aren't published, the way it's currently written is that these are filters on things in the objects, so the data plane objects. If now it's filtering on a control message parameter, then that needs to be specified. You obviously don't get the dynamic. If it's something pretty static, it works fine for the track extensions or track properties. I forget what we're calling them now.
Okay.
But this was really more geared for the dynamic things that change dynamically, loudness of a speaker or temperature of of a sensor or something like that.
So Mo, we have about 5 minutes left. So to the extent that you might want to sort of give a preview to market the PR to people, that would be great. And let's try to leave some time for discussion. I see Suhas is on the thing, but can you very quickly run through what this PR includes if you haven't already, and if you don't think you have already, and then we can just leave the last few minutes for discussion.
So just going back up to the list of filters. So Ian was talking about the track filter, and he's right. That is very unique because it's operating on a lot of tracks and middling down to a single track, and only works on the subscribe namespace, not single subscriptions. So that one is a little bit unique. These other ones are fairly straightforward. The location filter we already talked about. These other ones are all almost identical. They just take a object header parameter like group ID, subgroup ID, object ID, or priority, and they have a list of ranges, inclusive start and end ranges, And you can omit the end as usual if you want, only a start range. And they're all additive and they're all separate parameters, and they can all be added or removed with updates. And the extension filter is also like all of them. The only difference is that you have to specify the extension type first, and then it filters on the values. So for a specific extension, you can, include specific values of that extension, and then it's not just the range or it's not just the range of pairs. It's a tuple of extension type, start and end value. So you can repeat that tuple of 3 extension type, start and end value multiple times if you had multiple extensions that you wanted to filter on. And we talked about the track selection filter, and the selection criteria is also mentioned there, how things get selected, and the fact that that selection triggers a publish. So that's very different than the other messages. The selection triggers a publish so that the subscriber can learn the alias for that and track name. And then there's a mechanism to, when the track becomes deselected, how does it become deselected? When it drops out of the top highest values, it goes into another list called the deselected list, so that it can be reselected without doing a publish done and republish. But then after this deselected amount of tracks, you do have to do a publish done so you don't build up too much subscription state. And then I think Alan wanted some verbiage about, this kind of a seesaw. Some things are avoiding chattiness of control messages versus avoiding, excessive subscription state. So we have some text here about, how endpoints should balance those two things. And then throughout the other edits, these are clean sections. These are all clean ads. There's a lot of other, forensic changes to weave these new filters into the existing subscription filters. So that's here, 512 subscription location filter. And then for fetch, you'll also see how the location filter is used in the fetches. And then for the setup parameters, there's also guidance about how these setup parameters control these these limits on these filters. And that's pretty much it. So I'd like people to take a look and see if does it cover all the right bases? Is it covering too many bases and you want to split it up? Right now it's about like 200 and something lines additions and like 50 or so deletions. So it's not huge, it's not small, but it's not huge. I'm sorry, I can't see cues or anything because I'm on that tab, but
There is currently no queue, so.
All right, well, that's taking us to 1 minute left anyway. So thanks for your work on this, Mo. I know how hard it was to get here. I would encourage, this is a lot of implementation. So I would encourage the implementers who maybe aren't big use case people to take a good look at this and make sure that it is implementable in their view. This is a good opportunity for some of those people to get to head off problems at the past rather than wait for the draft to drop and realize that it's a real problem.
One real quick point on that. Thank you, Martin. The one important point that I didn't talk about, those setup parameters, the default for all those setup parameters is 0. So that means these filters are all off by default unless you explicitly negotiate them. So a relay can, by default, will not allow these parameters in requests. And the relay would have to open up, with a setup parameter to say, I allow this number of filter ranges. I allow this number of tracks in the track filter. Otherwise, these are off.
Right. So this isn't going to be a blocker for anyone doing draft 16, except to the extent that you've changed the existing filters. But but nevertheless, like, this is one of those things where, oh, I'm not going to implement this, I'm not going to read it, and then it's going to get locked into the to the draft for 2 or 3 versions. You're going to try to implement it and realize that there's a reading problem. I mean, I think this is more of a spelling and text editorial review that I'm asking for, rather than certainly people should make qualitative comments about this PR, and they are, but I think there's a broader community that probably ought to have a look, because this is a big new capability that we're implementing. All right, I think unless anyone else has something for the good of the group.
Have it been announced on the mailing list, the PR? In this case,
sorry,
no, but
to the design team.
please send an email advertising the PR a bit, because I think it's one that probably can benefit from it. So.
Okay, yeah, it was only circulated to the design team. I'll send it to the list.
All right, thank you very much, Mo. Ian and Magnus, thanks again for taking notes today, and wish everyone a happy holiday. We'll be back on January 12th. If you would like time on January 12th, please send us an email, the chairs an email by January 5th. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Cheers. Happy holidays.